China and the US agreed to a trade truce, and we are going to discuss the impact on agricultural commodities right here with Gidel on Connected Farmer, your channel, to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have had some big news between the US and China this week. Several products will have their tariff reduced at least for another year. And the Chinese have announced that they would buy 12 million metric tons in a period of 3 months. So, how do you think that will impact the markets in the coming week?
Well, that definitely the positive news that came out of this, considering where the two countries were at. Oh, geez, less than a month ago, and even started 6 months ago, and that up and down and all that. I gotta be impressed that we got quite a few of those issues uh, straightened out here at this point. The tariffs. President Trump threatened a 100% tariff here after the rare earth announcement that they were going to put tariffs on that. Well, the Chinese went ahead and said, no, we're going to delay that particular idea for at least a year. And hopefully they don't think that that's another factor they can work on a year from now. But that particular thing had a big, big difference. I think that was the first positive thing that happened. Then the fentanyl issue, which has been going on for quite some time, about the U.S. Accusing China of being sending the raw materials to the U.S. here for making fentanyl. They supposedly have made assurances that that isn't happening, so they dropped the tariff by 10% from 20% to 10% on that. From there, that really covered a lot of the big things. And then the one thing that everybody was looking for to find out what was going on here, since the Chinese have been very reluctant, to some extent, haven't bought any U.S. soybeans in the current crop year. And they went ahead and supposedly, and this is in the classic sense of how the Chinese phrase things and how the U.S. phrases things. Uh, they supposedly agreed, and it's not really officially in some of the initial uh, trade commentary that they were going to buy 12 million metric tons. Now, is it 12 million metric tons between now and the beginning of South America's purchases, which is in late February and March, or is it all the way through the crop year? And that always is a big factor, and I agree that some of the wording suggests that it's short term, and other scenarios being past history with the Chinese, they sometimes nod their head yes, but don't always do what the idea might turn out to be. One thing it did, though, during the week here, is a lot of this commentary was coming out Sunday night and Monday, and then we had a lull there ahead of the announcements, and we had another confirmation kind of rally there on Thursday, and that when the comments came out, was that they did buy, I think it was three contracts or three cargoes, I'm sorry, initially, and then they brought four more on Thursday of this week, and that's going the right direction. But seven cargoes against, I think that would be 60 apiece. That's maybe 400,000 tons of beans. That right now, at least, that's a long ways from the 12 million metric tons. So we have to end up seeing some pretty aggressive buying in here and need to continue to see that happening here to keep things kind of going. We've rallied quite some time here, quite a ways here in soybeans from, geez, down near $10, all the way up to just a smidgen over $11, and we are running into some long-term soybean resistance up here in this $11, 11.20 zone. But in general here, the market's going to continue to focus on how the Chinese actually fulfill the soybean side of things. That's going to be the big news here going forward here in the next well, month to 3 months.
Yeah, so you expect those prices to be sustained.
Well, we could have some pullbacks, but I don't think we're going to be back at $10 anytime soon here. Uh, I think that's the dealing in the world of international trade. There's always ups and downs and sideways. So hopefully we get more ups than we get downs on this whole thing on uh, after the big announcements that we have had, and definitely uh, 12 million metric tons, even if it was stretched out even into the spring or summer in a crop year, is still going to be a positive for us here. Uh, and along with another thing that happened that's kind of got lost in the shuffle was that when President Trump was in the Southeast Asian conferences he was at that occurred before the meeting with Z, and that was the fact that there was some commitments from Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, things like that. So the other buyers in the world of proteins that have really been on the sidelines here because they tended to buy stuff because of the transportation advantages out of Argentina and Brazil. Well, the Chinese have pretty well wiped out those supplies, so they had to be looking towards the U.S. And so that's the one thing that was something I was continued to concentrate on here a little bit was the fact that we some of the buying that was originally around the world coming from Brazil and Argentina has to be shifted to the U.S., and that was going to compensate for some of these losses of Chinese purchases. But boy, if that comes through as they're talking about, plus the Chinese, we could tighten up our carryover stock long term on things from this 300 million down to something less than that uh, going forward.
Yeah, so what about the core side of things? Have you raised any questions about what's going to happen with corn?
That is the more than $1 million question there, from the standpoint of that. Yeah, we are all concentrated on, and the world has been a huge buyer of corn, looking at their long-term prices here and the fact that, we're at or below low on some of this stuff. And, so, they were a big buyer of corn last year on a worldwide basis and that. Uh, Ukraine has had a good crop this year, so that does provide a little bit of opening for the U.S. more and that. But there is definitely some question marks kind of floating through the trade here. Uh, China has been a buyer of corn in the past, but last year they had a pretty sizable crop. I'm not sure it was record, but it was close to it, and that. And right now, they've had some ups and downs weather over there on things, particularly in the North China Plain, that's I think could be a factor here on their purchases. But we really don't have a great handle on, and we haven't seen a lot of Chinese corn buying to this point, and so that's going to end up being a highly observed situation here going forward on U.S. exports at this point. Boy, we had a very impressive nearly 2.9 million metric ton exports last year, and they're projecting a very similar amount for this year, and that could be a factor. Now, the other twist of this whole thing is that we've continued to talk and hear in the U.S. that our yields this harvest have not really matched up with the earlier projections from the USDA. So that's also maybe going to tighten up our carryover stocks.
Yes, and we also had this week the news about cattle. So the U.S. is not resuming its beef purchases from Mexico, and I guess that's a major factor in all the commodities.
Yes, yes. Well, that's back to this unfortunate issue of screw worm, that is it definitely is a factor in here that has got the U.S. Not interested in opening up the border. Now, the one thing that caused lots of fracas last week was the fact that President Trump decided that he was going to buy 80,000 metric tons of Argentine beef, and that's in the same regard of uh, his relationship with Mealy, and also the fact that Mealy had a big national election last week, which he happened to win because he was finding good buddies here in Washington, D.C. So, to some extent, the meat scenario is interesting because that 80,000 metric tons of imports of beef, that's really going to be your hamburger beef, low quality, or not low quality, but it's going to be not as fat as to put a steak on anything in the U.S. So, to some extent, that issue of our meat supplies on beef is still going to be reduced out in front of us, but it was psychologically a positive thing for beef prices. But I'm not sure we're going to have any major decline in U.S. meat, and it's still going to end up taking us anywhere from uh, 16 to 20, maybe as much as 24 months to get more beef on the in the feed yards to supply the U.S. So that issue is still out there in that going forward. But uh, right now, at least, if we can somehow or other open the beef trade that we've had. Now, to some extent, it's really not actual beef. It's moving the animals into the U.S. feed yards, and that's how the Mexican cattle get into the U.S. is that they move the cattle and we fatten them up in the U.S. And that might maybe we can figure out how to test for that and make sure that the beef that comes in doesn't have screw room, then I think that would make a major difference in what beef prices could be going forward. But that wasn't the situation over the last few months. They haven't figured out a testing program that I know of.
Yeah, so in the coming weeks, we are going to have data finally when it comes to the U.S. crop. The USDA has announced. So, what are you expecting for next week and the week that follows?
Well, it's good. The coming weeks here is going to be continue to watch what's going on in the world of soybean purchases and that. But you're exactly right. Interestingly enough, I thought that this would be one of the factors why they would end up getting this government back and open. But this time around, there's lots of different things that have been actually physical. And right now, one of the biggest ones, of course, is the SNAP program that supposedly was going to end here on the 1st of November, and that, which is a lot bigger than USDA's production reports. But they announced late on Friday that they were planning on issuing a November crop report on November 14th, which would be really practically 2 weeks ahead from that announcement on yesterday on things. And so that's definitely going to be needed. I know that we just couldn't really wait all the way to January to get a final production number, which this we're still going to have that. But at the same time, in the short term here, we needed some type of update uh, uh, on about where we're at. Definitely more and more. The reports continue to come in about issues, basically Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, the three I states for sure, Missouri, uh, Minnesota, and the Dakotas, maybe not so much about big disappointments, but just as an example, I think I mentioned it the last week or so that my home farm there in western Iowa was down anywhere from 15 to 18% uh, versus last year, and that because of the issues about uh, rust and things of that nature. And so that's a big difference. And so, uh, and particularly with Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota's the number three producer, but and Nebraska's right up there too. But having those significant problems in those states, and maybe even some of the other issues that might be hit things in the mid South with weather and Southeast. So uh, that's the really big factor coming at us here on the 14th. That's 2 weeks out from there. And I'm impressed that the USDA is going ahead and getting something scheduled and people know where things are at and going ahead. Hopefully the government will also be open for other things and we'll get some more data about how our exports have been going and some of the other things. We do have uh, right now at least a monthly NOPA crush statistic that's supposed to be, well, originally it's going to be, I think it was out on Tuesday this coming week. It might be Monday afternoon, but excuse me, it's the fats and oils version of that. It's the USDA's version versus the NOPA number, which we did have. And there is some confusion about what that number could turn out to be. They had a number of about 197 and a half million bushels, I should say, during the month of September. And that's a very impressive number. And in the tradition in the past, that was about 95% of the U.S. total. But over the last 6 months or so, some of the new production people coming online here have decided to uh, offer their information out to NOPA. So that number is narrowed. Now, how much is it narrowed? I don't know. I saw a number back in when NOPA put out and its numbers, that's by the way, there's a Processors Association itself, said that that number was representing 99% of the U.S. total. Well, maybe they meant 99% of their total, of their people. I don't know. There's lots of confusion. There's people that want to still look at that 197 and add 10 million to it, which I understand. But at this point, I'm a little gun shy. But either way, there's still going to be a solid number in that. And at this point, at least, until we get the government open, it won't be officially out one way or the other on soybean crush in the U.S. But in general, here, uh, the first thing in order is hopefully we can end up getting some type of agreement between the Republicans and Democrats to get the government back open again. That's the crucial thing here. But overall, we're marching ahead, and I think the and corn are both in kind of post-harvest mentality here, and that because we're at least over 80% on corn. Excuse me, 80% on beans harvest at this point, and we're probably in the low 70s on corn. And that's usually when things start to turn back up post harvest or a post harvest rally. So I think there's definitely going to be some support on setbacks in that. We've hit a short term objective in beans here around $11 and 15, 20 cents. And I encourage producers to maybe do our first 10% sale, by the way, on that. Uh, if we can get some further indications that China's buying things than just the seven cargoes, then maybe it'll have a chance to move on up into the 1150 area. And but long term, it kind of projects as high as 12, but it's going to be a process. It's not going to go straight up there. And at the same time, um, uncertainties in South America are still going to have to be added to this thing to try to get it really fired back up after the very depressed levels we've seen soybean prices in the world. U.S. corn prices were up around this 430, but we got huge basis discounts for cash in the fall and that. So I'm dissatisfied with our current 25% sales and that, and we'll wait to see what kind of happens between now and Thanksgiving on the corn.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
You have a great weekend, and hope you recovered from your sugar binge out there with all the trick-or-treaters and that. But we had a big crowd here in our little neighborhood of Chicago.
All right.